Part 1. The strange smell in my kitchen. The first time I noticed it, I thought I was imagining things. A faint smell of spices lingered in my kitchen when I walked in late one evening. It wasn't unpleasant, actually. It smelled incredible. Garlic, onions, something warm and comforting. Like a homemade meal. But that made no sense. I lived alone, and I hadn't cooked in days. At 63, I had gotten used to a quiet routine. After my wife passed away 3 years ago, the house felt too big and too empty. Cooking full meals no longer made sense when it was just me sitting at the table. So I mostly lived off simple things, sandwiches, soup, sometimes takeout. That's why the smell surprised me. Someone had definitely cooked here. I checked the kitchen carefully. The stove was clean. The sink was empty. Everything looked exactly the way I had left it. I shook my head and laughed quietly to myself. "Daniel," I muttered, "you're losing it." But the next evening, it happened again. I returned home from my evening walk, unlocked the door, and the same smell greeted me. Fresh food. Something rich and warm. This time I walked straight into the kitchen and froze. There was a pot on the stove, still warm. My heart started pounding. Someone had been inside my house. I checked the back door. Locked. Windows closed. Nothing was missing. But someone had clearly cooked here. I stood there for a long time, trying to make sense of it. Finally, one possibility came to mind. Maria. Maria had worked for me as a cleaning lady for almost 5 years. After my wife died, she helped keep the house in order. She was kind, quiet, and trustworthy. She usually cleaned in the mornings while I ran errands. But maybe she had stopped by later? The next morning when Maria arrived, I decided to ask. She was wiping the dining table when I walked in. "Maria," I said casually, "did you happen to come by the house last night?" She looked up, confused. "Last night?" "No, sir." I frowned. There was cooking in the kitchen. Her eyebrows rose. "No, sir. I only come in the mornings." For a moment, we both stood there silently. Then she hesitated. "Well," she said slowly, "there is one possibility." "What?" I asked. "My daughter sometimes waits outside for me when I finish cleaning. Her name is Sophia. She's 17. I nodded. I had seen her once or twice. Quiet girl. Always polite. But she wouldn't come inside, Maria continued quickly. I've always told her not to. I shrugged. Maybe someone else came in by mistake. Maria shook her head. That's not possible. I didn't argue. But that night, I decided to find out the truth. Instead of going for my usual walk, I turned off all the lights in the house and quietly sat in the living room, waiting. 30 minutes passed, then 40. Just when I was about to give up, I heard it, the soft sound of the back door opening. My heart started racing. Slow footsteps entered the kitchen, then the click of the stove, and the quiet sound of someone beginning to cook. I stood up slowly and walked toward the kitchen, and when I turned the corner, I saw her. Maria's daughter, standing at my stove, cooking. But what shocked me the most was the look on her face when she realized I was standing there watching her. Part 2, caught in my kitchen. The moment Sophia saw me standing in the doorway, the spoon slipped from her hand and clattered against the stove. Her eyes widened with panic. I'm sorry," she stammered quickly. "I didn't mean to. I'll leave right now." For a second, neither of us moved. Steam rose from the pot she had been stirring, filling the kitchen with the rich smell of tomatoes, garlic, and something sweet, maybe basil. It smelled like a real home-cooked meal, the kind my wife used to make. But that wasn't what I was thinking about. Someone had been sneaking into my house, my kitchen, my stove, and that someone was a 17-year-old girl. "What are you doing here?" I asked calmly. Sophia immediately lowered her head. "I'm really sorry, sir," she said. "Please don't tell my mom." That caught my attention. "Why would I tell your mom?" She hesitated, then looked like she might cry. She would lose her job. The words hung in the air. I leaned against the counter, studying her more carefully. Sophia looked exhausted. Her clothes were simple, slightly worn, and her hands were trembling. This didn't look like someone sneaking in for fun. "How long have you been coming here?" I asked. She hesitated again. "A few weeks." "A few weeks?" I repeated. She nodded slowly. My first instinct was anger. Anyone would feel the same. But the strange thing was, I wasn't angry. I was curious. "You come into someone else's house," I said slowly, "cook in their kitchen, and hope they never notice?" Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. "I only come when you're out." That much was obvious. I crossed my arms. "But why?" For a moment she said nothing. Then her eyes drifted to the pot on the stove. "I just needed a place to cook." That answer made no sense. "You have a kitchen at home," I said. Her expression tightened. "Not anymore." I frowned. "What do you mean?" She looked embarrassed. "We lost our apartment." The words came out quickly, like she wanted them over with. "We're staying in my aunt's living room now. 7 people in one small place." She gave a small, sad laugh. "There's no room to cook there." Now things were starting to make sense. Still, something didn't add up. "You break into my house just to cook dinner?" I asked. She shook her head. "No." "At school." I stared at her. "You're running a food business out of my kitchen?" For the first time since I walked in, a tiny smile appeared on her face. Only a small one. I looked at the pot again. Whatever she was cooking smelled incredible. "How much do you make?" I asked. "Sometimes $50 a day." $50. That wasn't nothing. "What do you do with the money?" Her answer came instantly. "Help my mom." That was the moment something inside me softened. Maria had never once complained about her life. She worked quietly every day, never late, never asked for anything. And now I understood why. Her daughter was trying to help her survive. Still, there was one problem. "You understand you can't just sneak into people's homes," I said. Sophia nodded quickly. I know. I was going to stop. Tonight was supposed to be the last time. I raised an eyebrow. Why? She hesitated again, then said something that made my stomach twist. Because someone else found out. I felt a chill run down my spine. Someone else? Sophia nodded slowly. Her voice dropped to a whisper. And they said if I didn't give them money, they were going to tell you. Part 3, someone was watching. For a moment, the kitchen felt colder. I looked at Sophia carefully. Who found out? I asked. She hesitated, nervously twisting the sleeve of her sweater. I don't know his name. That answer didn't help. What do you mean you don't know? She swallowed. He lives down the street. The man with the black pickup truck. My mind immediately pictured the house she meant. A man named Greg lived there. He had moved into the neighborhood about 6 months earlier. Quiet, kept to himself. But something about him had always felt off. What did he say to you? I asked. Sophia's voice dropped. He saw me come in through the back gate one evening. My stomach tightened. And? He followed me. Now my chest felt heavy. And when I left with the food containers, he stopped me. I leaned forward. What exactly did he say? Sophia looked ashamed. He said he knew I was sneaking into your house. Her hands started shaking slightly. He said if I didn't pay him $50 every week, he'd tell you I was breaking in. For a moment, I didn't speak. Not because I didn't understand, but because I understood perfectly. Greg wasn't just threatening her. He was extorting a 17-year-old girl. You've been paying him? I asked quietly. Sophia nodded. For 3 weeks. My jaw tightened. How much total? $150. I felt anger rising inside me. Not toward Sophia, toward Greg. That's why tonight was supposed to be the last time, she continued. I can't keep paying him. She wiped her eyes quickly. I was going to stop cooking and just find another job. I looked at the pot again. Steam slowly rising from the lid. The smell filled the room. Something about the moment reminded me of my wife. She used to say food was love you could share. And here was this girl, trying to survive, trying to help her mother, and being blackmailed for it. I sighed and pulled out a chair. Sit down, I said. Sophia looked confused. But, sit. She slowly sat at the kitchen table. I opened the pot. Inside was a thick vegetable stew with chicken and herbs. It looked incredible. Did you make this recipe yourself? I asked. She nodded. My grandmother taught me. I grabbed a spoon and tasted it, and my eyes widened. Good? She asked nervously. I stared at her. This is restaurant quality. She blinked. Really? Yes. I put the spoon down. Then I said something she clearly wasn't expecting. You're not cooking here secretly anymore. Her face immediately fell. I understand, she said quietly. I'll leave. But I shook my head. No, you're not leaving. She looked confused. What? If you're going to cook here, I said calmly, we're going to do it the right way. She stared at me. You mean, yes, no more sneaking, no more paying Greg. Her eyes widened. But he'll tell you. I smiled slightly. That's the funny part, because this is my house, and I already know, for the first time all night. Sophia actually laughed, but then her expression changed again. Wait, what about Greg? I leaned back in my chair, and for the first time that night, I smiled. Greg just made a very big mistake, because now he wasn't threatening a scared teenager anymore. He was about to learn something he clearly didn't know. He had just tried to blackmail the wrong neighbor. Part 4, Greg's Big Mistake. Sophia looked at me nervously. But what if he tells someone? She asked. I leaned back in my chair, completely calm. Let him. She stared at me, confused. You're not worried? I shook my head. Not even a little. Sophia didn't understand yet, and honestly, I didn't blame her. From her point of view, Greg had all the power. He knew she had been sneaking into my house. But what Greg didn't know was that the moment Sophia told me the truth, everything had changed. I stood up from the table and walked to the kitchen window. From there, you could see part of Greg's driveway across the street. And sure enough, the black pickup truck was parked there. Is that his truck? I asked. Sophia followed my gaze and nodded. Yes, I watched it for a moment. Then I smiled slightly. Well, I said, tonight is going to be interesting. She looked worried again. What are you going to do? Instead of answering, I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. Then I dialed a number. Sophia watched me carefully. Hello? A voice answered. Hey, Tom, I said. It's Daniel. Daniel, haven't heard from you in a while. Everything okay? Oh, everything's fine, I replied. I just wanted to ask you something. Sure. Is Greg Miller still on probation? There was a pause on the other end of the line. Sophia's eyes widened. You know him? She whispered. I raised a finger, telling her to wait. Tom cleared his throat on the phone. Yes, actually he is. That confirmed what I already suspected. Greg Miller had moved into the neighborhood shortly after getting out of prison. Petty crimes, fraud, extortion. Nothing violent, but enough to land him on probation for 3 years. Why do you ask? Tom said. Well, I replied casually, I believe he's been threatening a minor for money. The silence on the phone was immediate. You're serious? Very. Tell me everything. So I did. I explained exactly what Sophia had told me. The threats, the money, the blackmail. When I finished, Tom sighed heavily. That idiot, he muttered. What? I asked. Extortion is a direct violation of his probation. I smiled slightly. That's what I thought. Tom's tone turned serious. We'll take care of it. Tonight. I thanked him and hung up. Sophia looked like she had just watched something unbelievable. You called the police? She whispered. Not exactly, I said. Tom's an old friend. Works probation enforcement. Her mouth slowly opened. So Greg is about to have a very bad night. Just as I said that, we heard it, the sound of tires outside. 2 dark SUVs pulling up in front of Greg's house. Sophia rushed to the window. Oh my God, 2 officers stepped out. Then another. They walked straight toward Greg's front door. 30 seconds later, the door opened, and Greg stepped outside, confused, then nervous, then very pale, because the officers already knew why they were there. Sophia covered her mouth. They're arresting him. I watched quietly. That's what happens when someone thinks they can bully the wrong person. Across the street, Greg was placed in handcuffs. The truck's headlights flickered as an officer searched it. Sophia slowly turned back toward me. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "You did all that for me?" I looked at the pot still simmering on the stove. "No," I said. "I did it because nobody gets to threaten a kid trying to help her mother." Sophia looked like she might cry again. But this time, they weren't tears of fear. And for the first time since I caught her in my kitchen, she finally looked safe. But neither of us knew yet that the real surprise wasn't Greg. The real surprise was still waiting, and it had everything to do with what Sophia was cooking. Part 5. The meal that changed everything. After the police cars disappeared down the street with Greg in the back seat, the house became quiet again. Sophia was still standing near the window, watching the empty road. "He's really gone," she whispered. "For a while, yes," I replied. She slowly turned toward me, still looking like she couldn't believe what had just happened. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did," I said calmly. "No one should threaten you for trying to survive." For a moment we stood there in silence. Then the smell from the kitchen pulled our attention back to the stove. The stew was still simmering. Sophia rushed over and turned the heat down. "Oh no, I almost forgot," she said. I smiled slightly. "You almost forgot the most important part." She looked embarrassed. "Do you want to try it?" I laughed quietly. I already did. Her eyes widened. "You did? And it's the best thing I've eaten in years." She looked shocked. "Really?" I nodded. "Really." Sophia looked down at the pot like she was seeing it differently now. "My grandmother used to cook this," she said softly. "She taught me everything." I grabbed 2 bowls from the cabinet. "Well," I said, "let's eat." She hesitated. "But this was supposed to be for school tomorrow. How much do you usually make?" I asked. "About 15 portions." "And how fast do they sell?" "Almost immediately." That didn't surprise me. Anyone who tasted that stew would want more. We sat down at the table. The first bite brought back memories I hadn't felt in years. My wife had loved cooking. The kitchen used to be the warmest place in the house. But after she passed away, the stove had stayed mostly cold. Until tonight. "You could sell this anywhere," I said. Sophia looked surprised. "I already do. At school." "No," I said. "I mean a real place." She blinked. "A restaurant? Or a food truck?" She laughed nervously. "That costs money." True. And my mom and I barely pay rent. I leaned back in my chair. Maybe that's about to change. Her smile faded slightly. What do you mean? I looked around the kitchen. The empty counters. The quiet house. The big dining room that no one used anymore. Then I said something that made her completely freeze. What if this house became your kitchen? Her eyes widened. What? I mean it, I said. You cook. I handle the business side. Sophia stared at me like I had just suggested something impossible. You're serious? Yes. But why would you help me like that? I thought about that question for a moment. Then I gave her the honest answer. Because I haven't heard this house feel alive in 3 years. The smell of real food. The sound of someone cooking. The warmth in the kitchen. All of it reminded me of something I had lost. Sophia's voice was quiet. My mom would never agree to this. I smiled. Then tomorrow we talked to her. She still looked overwhelmed. But what if no one buys the food? I laughed. Trust me, after tasting this, people will line up. Sophia looked at the stew again. And for the first time that night, I saw something different in her eyes. Not fear, not stress, hope, but neither of us knew yet that the first person to show up the next morning would change everything. Because the knock on my door the next day was someone neither of us expected to see. Part 6, The Knock at the Door. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. For the first time in years, the house didn't feel empty. There was movement in the kitchen. The soft clatter of pans. The smell of onions and garlic. Sophia was already cooking. I walked into the kitchen and leaned against the doorway. She didn't notice me at first. She was focused, stirring a large pot with the same careful attention my wife used to have when she cooked. Morning, I said. She jumped slightly. Oh, I didn't hear you. I noticed, I replied with a small smile. How long have you been up? Since 6, she said. 6? I wanted to practice a new recipe. I chuckled. You're treating this like a restaurant already. She shrugged shyly. If we're really doing this, I want the food to be perfect. That answer made me smile. Before I could say anything else, knock, knock, knock. Someone was at the door. Sophia froze. Do you think it's Greg? She whispered nervously. No, I said calmly. If it was Greg, he'd have bigger problems right now. I walked to the front door and opened it. Standing there was Maria, Sophia's mother, and the moment she saw me, her expression looked serious. Very serious. Daniel, she said, I need to talk to you. Then her eyes moved past me, and she saw Sophia standing in the kitchen, holding a spoon, cooking. Maria's face changed instantly. Sophia, what are you doing here? Sophia froze. Her voice came out small. Mom, I can explain. But Maria was already shaking her head. You broke into his house? No, Sophia said quickly. It's not like that. Maria looked at me. Her voice filled with embarrassment. I am so sorry. I promise you I didn't know. She was doing this. She turned back toward Sophia. You're coming with me. Right now. Sophia's eyes filled with panic. But Mom, no, I raised you better than this. I stepped forward. Maria, wait. Both of them looked at me. You don't understand, she said quickly. I'll take responsibility. If anything was damaged, nothing was damaged, I said. Maria stopped talking. What? In fact, I continued calmly. Your daughter might be the best cook I've met in years. Maria blinked. I'm sorry? I gestured toward the stove. That smell in the kitchen? She made it. Maria slowly looked at the pot. Then back at Sophia. You were cooking here? Sophia nodded nervously. I wanted to help you with money. Maria's expression softened for a moment, but she still looked worried. Daniel, she shouldn't have done that. You're right, I said. She shouldn't have had to. Maria frowned. What do you mean? I leaned against the counter. What if Sophia didn't have to hide anymore? What if she could cook here? Legally? Both of them stared at me. I'm talking about turning this kitchen into a small food business, I said. Sophia cooks? I help manage it. Maria looked completely stunned. You're serious? Very. She turned slowly toward Sophia. You told him everything? Sophia nodded. Maria looked overwhelmed. I don't know what to say. I smiled. You could start by tasting the food. Maria hesitated. Then Sophia carefully filled a bowl and handed it to her. Maria tasted it, and her eyes widened. That's your grandmother's recipe, she whispered. Sophia nodded. Maria looked at me again, and for the first time, there were tears in her eyes. You really believe she can do this? I looked at Sophia, standing there nervously beside the stove. Then I said the truth. I don't just believe it. I think this might be the beginning of something big, but none of us realized yet that the person who would change everything was about to walk through that door. And this time, it wouldn't be family. It would be someone from the outside. Part 7. The Unexpected Visitor. Maria was still standing in the kitchen, holding the bowl in her hands like she couldn't quite believe what was happening. Sophia watched her nervously. Well? Sophia asked quietly. Maria took another bite, then another, and finally she nodded slowly. It tastes exactly like my mother's, she whispered. Sophia smiled softly. For a moment, the kitchen felt warm again, like a real home. But just as I was about to say something, knock, knock, another knock at the door. All three of us looked toward the hallway. That must be someone from the neighborhood, I said. I walked toward the door and opened it. Standing there was a father, man in his 40s wearing a dark jacket and holding a clipboard. Good morning, he said politely. Morning, I replied. Is this Mr. Daniel Harris's residence? That's me. He nodded. My name is Victor Lane. I'm from the Riverside Food Festival. That surprised me. The food festival? I asked. He smiled. Yes, the one downtown next month. I frowned slightly. And why are you here? Victor lifted the lid of a small container he was holding. Inside was stew. The same stew Sophia had been cooking. My eyebrows rose. Where did you get that? He chuckled. My nephew goes to Westbrook High School. Sophia froze in the kitchen behind me. He bought this from a student selling homemade meals, Victor continued. I tried it last night, and this morning I had to come find the person who made it. Now my curiosity was fully awake. You tracked the cook to my house? Victor nodded. It took some asking around. Then he leaned slightly closer and lowered his voice. Because whoever cooked this belongs at the festival. Behind me, I heard Sophia gasp quietly. Maria stepped closer. What festival? She asked. Victor smiled. The Riverside Food Festival is the biggest street food event in the city. Over 50 vendors, thousands of visitors. My mind immediately started working. What are you offering? I asked. Victor looked directly past me at Sophia. I want her to enter the competition. Sophia's eyes widened. Competition? He nodded. Best new street food vendor. Maria looked stunned. But she's only 17. Victor shrugged. Talent doesn't care about age. He held up the container again. This recipe is special. Then he said something none of us expected. The winner gets $25,000 and a 1-year contract with 3 restaurant investors. The room went silent. Sophia looked like she had stopped breathing. Maria covered her mouth. I leaned against the doorframe, thinking carefully. A real opportunity, but also a risk. Then Victor asked the question. So, will she compete? Sophia looked at me, then at her mother. Neither of them spoke, because suddenly, this wasn't just about cooking anymore. This could change their entire lives. But the real problem was something Victor didn't know yet, because entering that competition meant stepping into a world where not everyone played fair, and someone there was already planning to stop Sophia before she even started. And why are you here? Victor lifted the lid of a small container he was holding. Inside was stew. The same stew Sophia had been cooking. My eyebrows rose. Where did you get that? He chuckled. My nephew goes to Westbrook High School. Sophia froze in the kitchen behind me. He bought this from a student selling homemade meals, Victor continued. I tried it last night, and this morning I had to come find the person who made it. Now my curiosity was fully awake. You tracked the cook to my house? Victor nodded. It took some asking around. Then he leaned slightly closer and lowered his voice. Because whoever cooked this belongs at the festival. Behind me, I heard Sophia gasp quietly. Maria stepped closer. What festival? She asked. Victor smiled. The Riverside Food Festival is the biggest street food event in the city. Over 50 vendors. Thousands of visitors. My mind immediately started working. What are you offering? I asked. Victor looked directly past me at Sophia. I want her to enter the competition. Sophia's eyes widened. Competition? He nodded. Best new street food vendor. Maria looked stunned. But she's only 17. Victor shrugged. Talent doesn't care about age. He held up the container again. This recipe is special. Then he said something none of us expected. The winner gets $25,000 and a 1-year contract with 3 restaurant investors. The room went silent. Sophia looked like she had stopped breathing. Maria covered her mouth. I leaned against the doorframe, thinking carefully. A real opportunity, but also a risk. Then Victor asked the question, "So, will she compete?" Sophia looked at me, then at her mother. Neither of them spoke, because suddenly, this wasn't just about cooking anymore. This could change their entire lives. But the real problem was something Victor didn't know yet, because entering that competition meant stepping into a world where not everyone played fair, and someone there was already planning to stop Sophia before she even started. Part 8, the first warning. For a long moment, no one said anything. Sophia looked at the container of stew in Victor's hands like it had suddenly become something much bigger than food. "You want me to compete?" she asked slowly. Victor nodded. "Yes, but I've never done anything like that before," she said. "That's exactly why I'm here," Victor replied. "The competition is for new talent." Maria looked nervous. "What kind of competition is it exactly?" Victor explained calmly. "Every participant gets a small food stand. You cook your best dish, visitors vote, and a panel of chefs chooses the final winner. And the prize is really $25,000? Maria asked carefully. Victor smiled. "That's only the beginning. The real prize is the restaurant investors. They fund the winner's food business." The kitchen went silent again, because suddenly the idea of Sophia cooking in my kitchen didn't seem so small anymore. Sophia finally looked up. "What if I lose?" Victor shrugged. "Then you gain experience. But if you win, your life changes." Maria looked at her daughter. "You don't have to decide right now." But Sophia surprised both of us. "I want to try." Victor smiled. "I hoped you'd say that." He pulled a form from his clipboard and placed it on the table. "Registration closes tomorrow. Think about it." Then he shook my hand and left. The moment the door closed, the house fell quiet again. Maria looked worried. "Daniel, this sounds like a big risk." "Maybe," I said. "But sometimes big chances come disguised as crazy ideas." Sophia stood silently, staring at the registration form. "I've only cooked for my friends at school," she said. "What if I embarrass myself?" "You won't," I replied. But before anyone could say anything else, my phone buzzed on the table. A text message. Unknown number. I opened it and immediately felt my stomach tighten. The message said only 4 words. "Tell the girl to quit." Sophia noticed my expression. "What is it?" she asked. I showed her the phone. Her face turned pale. Maria frowned. "Who would send that?" Then another message arrived. This one even shorter. "The festival is mine." Sophia's hands started shaking. "You think someone from the competition sent that?" I looked at the number again. No idea. But one thing was suddenly very clear. Someone already knew about Sophia, and they didn't want her there. Maria looked frightened. Maybe this competition isn't a good idea. Sophia stared at the message for a long moment. Then she slowly lifted her head. And for the first time, I saw determination in her eyes. "They don't even know me," she said quietly. "Exactly," I replied. "And that's probably what scares them." But what none of us knew yet was that the person sending those messages wasn't just a competitor. He was someone who had already ruined careers before, and Sophia had just stepped directly into his path. Part 9. The Day Everything Changed Final. The Riverside Food Festival was louder than I expected. Music, crowds, dozens of food stands lined across the park. The smell of grilled meat, spices, and fresh bread filled the air. Sophia stood behind her small booth, gripping the edge of the table. Her sign simply read, "Grandma's Kitchen, Homemade Stew." Maria stood beside her, still nervous. "I can't believe we're really doing this," she whispered. Sophia looked out at the crowd. "I'm scared." I leaned closer. "Good," I said. "That means you care." For the first hour, things were slow. People passed by, glancing at the booth but stopping at the larger, flashier vendors instead. One booth in particular had a long line. A man named Leon Vargas, a well-known street chef who had competed in the festival for years. I recognized the name from the text messages, the one who had warned Sophia to quit. Leon noticed us watching and smirked from across the row of stands. Then he said loudly to someone beside him, "Looks like the amateur booth finally showed up." A few people laughed. Maria looked angry. Sophia looked embarrassed. But she didn't respond. She just kept stirring the pot. Then something unexpected happened. A young woman walking past stopped suddenly. "What is that smell?" she asked. Sophia looked up. "Chicken stew," she said quietly. The woman tasted a small sample. Her eyes widened. "Oh, wow." She turned around and waved to her friends. "You have to try this." Within minutes, 5 people were standing at the booth. Then 10. Then 20. Word spread quickly through the crowd. "That stew stand over there. You have to try it." Soon the line at Sophia's booth became longer than any other vendors, even Leon's. Across the festival, Leon's smile slowly disappeared. The judges began making their rounds. 3 professional chefs stopped at Sophia's stand. They tasted the stew, then looked at each other. One of them whispered something to the others. The crowd kept growing. Maria stood beside her daughter, tears quietly filling her eyes. "You did it," she whispered. But the real moment came later that evening, when the festival host stepped onto the stage. And now, the winner of this year's Best New Vendor competition. The crowd went silent. Sophia squeezed my hand nervously. The host opened the envelope, then smiled. "The winner is Grandma's Kitchen." The crowd erupted in cheers. Sophia stood frozen. Maria started crying. And for the first time since I had caught her sneaking into my kitchen, Sophia looked like she finally believed in herself. Leon watched from across the crowd, stunned, because the girl he tried to scare away had just beaten every professional chef at the festival. Later that night, as we packed up the booth, Sophia looked at me quietly. If you hadn't caught me in your kitchen that night, none of this would have happened. I smiled. Funny how life works. She laughed softly. Do you still mind that I broke into your house? I looked at the empty festival stands around us, then back at her. Honestly, that might be the best break-in I've ever experienced, and sometimes the smallest secret can lead to the biggest opportunity.